Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to present today on the topic of workplace violence, prevention, and focusing on employees. Since I've been speaking on this topic and writing on this topic, and if you've checked white papers at SHRM, you'll see my writings on this. I've also assisted companies with employees at risk for over 35 years. And what I've determined, we're in the most dynamic environment I've ever seen in my 35 years of doing this. In particular, within the past year, we've experienced a pandemic, forcing employers to have employees work at home, or furloughing employees, or even terminating employees in some cases. We also are experiencing one of the most societal fragmentations we've ever had. We've been social distancing, isolating ourselves from family, friends, and neighbors. And within the past couple months, we've been reintroducing and re-socializing and creating some dynamics there. There's been racial tension, there's been political divide, and there's been a medical, political feud as to whether to wear a mask or not wear a mask, or get vaccinated or not get vaccinated. And this all plays into the dynamics. And on top of that, as of yesterday, we've had 268 mass shootings in the United States. That means 3 or 4 more people have been shot in mass shooting, in one singular criminal event. On top of that, and any of you who've traveled recently, you will appreciate this, the FAA for the first time has reported more than 2,000 complaints of unruly passengers, which required police or law enforcement agencies to come on the plane. This is unusual. Given my background as a former law enforcement officer, as well as a former chief people officer for a number of healthcare companies, I want to focus today on employees and how employers can mitigate these employees from engaging in aberrant behavior in the workplace. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. And what I want to do is focus on the categories. So I like to break this down into 4 categories of the typical workplace violence events that occur. And the first category is what we call employee-on-employee conflict. And that usually plays out in the workplace. The second category is what we call domestic violence. And domestic violence simply is you have an employee who has an estranged relationship with someone, either a spouse or a girlfriend, boyfriend, or an acquaintance, and that person comes on the workplace to harm your employee. The third category is what we call aberrant behavior. And this is where you have an employee that you know about, have a relationship with, and all of a sudden, unprovoked, they engage in abusive behavior in the workplace. And sometimes you'll have what we also call a stranger, and that person comes onto the workplace with only one intention, and that is to engage in criminal intent. And that is simply where you have, if you're a pharmacy or hospital, will come on the premise to commit a crime relating to drugs, something of that nature. If you're a retail environment, somebody robbing your store, things of that nature. The fourth category we look at is external threats, customers, clients, and patients. Now, once you break these into the 4 categories, then you then look at the likelihood of these events occurring given the nature of your business. So as I mentioned, stranger type persons are ones that have criminal intent, and they constitute about 25% of the workplace violence incidences. And that's significant. The biggest bulk of people that we see on workplace violence, these are customers, clients, patients, and they represent about 40% of the workplace violence, and their motives vary. So like a patient who is in a psychiatric ward will act out and become violent with a nurse or caretaker, or clients at a professional business, or customers in a retail setting where the customer gets aggravated and reaches over and punches the sales clerk. The next category is we have coworkers, and they may be current or former employees. And the former ones come back to the workplace. And they represent about 26% of the workplace violence incidences here in the United States. And the last category is the domestic violence. And they represent 27%. And that becomes relevant in a minute as I'm going to speak a little bit about that. But what you want to do here is look at the four categories. What's the likelihood of occurrence? And then you gear your plans up accordingly. If you're adding up the statistics here, they don't add up there because there are overlaps of each one of these categories. So, but look at the raw statistics and you'll be able to calculate where your workplace fits into the scheme of things here. One of the things that we like to do is have employees recognize red flags. And perhaps you've seen this when there's been a mass shooting in a workplace. The reporters will ask employees, oh, what happened here? And they will invariably make the comment like, well, this employee, he was a problem. He thought we were surveilling him. He accused my management of assault and craziness. And I knew he was going to act out. That's a classic. We knew that that was going to happen. They're the red flags. And as employer, you want to be proactive when you get any type of inkling that there's something out there. Now, what we want to look at from an employment standpoint is the job. Look at the job. Is it stressful? Or is that employee creating stress because he has difficulty in the job? That becomes relevant when you look at this and the workplace. The stressful work environment. Let's say your business is a shipping company, a fast forwarder, like a UPS or FedEx. Yes, that's a stressful work environment. That's different than the job stress, but it's a stressful work environment where you have to meet timetables to execute on your activity, your work activity. Another category is managing others. And this is a real common problem that I see often in the workplace, where you have a manager who is an excellent salesperson or an excellent nurse. And what do we do in business? We elevate them in the food chain to supervisor and manager. And we don't equip them with the skill set to manage people. And that's an important thing. And as a result, there's conflict that plays out between this person trying to manage others with not the skills or knowledge or even a training, basic training in terms of managing people. Other is looking at working with people who are unstable or volatile. And this is a real concern, particularly in the labor pool we're in right now, because we're hiring people that we don't have a relationship or we don't have the time to vet them in terms of the references and things of that nature. And so we're putting them in the workplace and they're virtually unknown and they are acting in a strange way. And you want to make sure that you monitor this and try to understand what is going on. The other is employees that work alone. Why do they work alone? You want to understand that in terms of how you want to manage that employee and how you want to engage with that employee so that you get a maximum benefit of their services, but also make sure that you're focusing on helping them, because it's all about retaining the best and supporting those employees. Look at their activities. Often you'll have repetitive tasks to do, and sometimes the employee gets frustrated and acts out with these tasks at times. So you want to be mindful of that. Changes in workload or job responsibility. This is a real classic, and we're seeing it play out. To give you an idea, we had almost 3% of the United States workforce resign in April. That is the 20-year high. We're seeing people leave the workplace, and they're called YOLOs. That's you only live once. They're leaving the workplace to spend the summer away or stay away from that workplace. And so it puts tremendous pressure on employers trying to get the work activity done. And that goes on the backs of the current employees there. And so you have to monitor that workload and their job responsibility and not overload them, and given that our labor pool right now and what's happening in the marketplace. The next two categories I'm going to illustrate, because this was really an important problem, and that was change in behavior and physical appearance. I got a call from a client, a very sophisticated client, said, we have an employee and we want you to look at this situation. So we had an employee. The general counsel for a publicly traded, international traded company would not go to work because this employee was basically outside her office. He had not, when he came in for an 8-week period, he would turn on his computer, eat his lunch at the desk, and only leave his desk to go home, or what we thought he was going home, or have lunch at the desk. He didn't bathe for those 8 weeks. He wore the same clothes. And so you can imagine that was disconcerting. I ended up separating this employee from the workplace on a Friday. It was a long weekend. I decided to have the local police in Paramus, New Jersey, go into the parking lot and do a check to see if he had returned to the workplace. Well, in fact, he did. A uniformed police officer asked him for his identification. He was the person. The officer could see the 4 AK-47s in the back seat of his car. He then got a search warrant, and they found a trunk load of explosives and ammunition. The guy, we believe today, was planning to come back to the workplace and harm people on that, when the business opened on that Monday. We also found out he was living in his car for the 8 weeks. So that kind of information is important. So if you see changes in behavior, physical appearance, don't ignore it. The other thing is you're seeing people return to the workplace due to COVID-19. We're asking employees who've been isolated, who've been working in their basement or working in their kitchen or working in their bedroom, to come back into the workplace and engage with others. And this can be extremely challenging. And you're seeing it play out on airlines in terms of people even taking a flight and engaging with others. So we're asking people to re-socialize, and we want to be mindful of that. The other thing is job inflexibility. This same employee who's been working at his home is able to do, when he was at home, was able to take lunch at 10 o'clock or lunch at 3 o'clock. Now you're asking him or her to come in at 9 o'clock and have lunch at a specific time, take breaks at a specific time, and leave the workplace at the end of the day. This is a change in their work behavior for the last 15 months or so. So those are things you want to be mindful of. Now, what's happening outside the workplace with the employee? And having been in senior management, heard it, and they say, it's not my business. When they come to work, they check their emotions and their feelings at the work before they come into the office. Not going to happen. It's not going to happen. It's just not human nature. So I'm encouraging employers to get involved, look for some of the warning signs, and engage with the employee in a thoughtful way. So if they have physical problems, dealing with a chronic back problem or something of that nature, recognize that, engage with the employee. If they're having mental health issues, make sure you have an employee assistance program available and help them in some fashion. If they're experiencing financial difficulties, whether that's a bankruptcy or a car repossession or foreclosure on a mortgage, marital and relationship issues, whether they're getting a separation or a divorce, caring for a sick relative or elderly patient, particularly if that parent's at home, concern about childcare. That is a real serious issue with certain employees. A couple months ago, they were able to work at home and they could take care of childcare. Now they're coming into the workplace, that daycare center may not be open, or that person responsible for taking care of their child where they're at work is no longer available. So that becomes an initial burden on that person and a concern, a genuine concern. Alcohol, drug abuse, and reacting to what we call uncontrollable events. We just went through the pandemic. None of us could control it. And for a person that is unable to mentally cope with uncontrollable events, this becomes a real serious challenge. So now we have the categories, we have the frequency of occurrence. We know we're looking for these red flags. And one of the big red flags we want to make sure you really pay attention to, because there's a high probability that if an employee has a protection from abuse order, they're going to go to that person's going to, the abuser is going to show up in the workplace. You've got a high probability of occurrence. So when an employee has secured a PFA against a spouse, a boyfriend, girlfriend, or acquaintance, there's a strong likelihood that that subject of the PFA is going to appear in the workplace to confront that employee. It's based on historic referencing, and we know that that's going to play out. So what do? Well, as soon as you learn that somebody has gotten a PFA order, you want to engage with the employee. Find out what caused them to get that PFA. What's the concern? Have there been any actions taken? In other words, has he harmed her or him at home and things of that nature? You want to get a copy of the order. Don't be afraid to engage with the employee and ask for it. It's absolutely paramount that you get a copy of that, because you're going to use it to have a copy at your office, and you're going to be able to give a copy to the police. You want to get a photograph of the person if that's possible. You know, how do you do that? Well, you go on the internet and see if there's any photographs of them, if she doesn't or he doesn't have a picture of her, or get a description. And you want to prepare. What's your security look like in the office? What's your access control? Do you have closed circuit coverage, television coverage of the office area? You want to notify the police. And often employers say, gee, I don't know if the police are going to be interested. Well, one of the things you have to do is go take the PFA order and try to speak to the highest ranking police officer. And the way you engage with police, and I can share this as a former federal agent, is you say to the police officer, here's my concern. I have this protective order, but if we have to call the police and put a 911 call in, we don't want your officer in danger. You just got the police's attention, because now you care about the police, that they're not rolling up into your workplace thinking it's, you know, a disturbance or something of that nature. You actually have a real event, and you want to make sure that the police have respond in the appropriate action in terms of that. Also, you should be aware that most police departments today, if you go on their website, provide free consulting services. Come out to your workplace, look at it from a security standpoint, take advantage of that service that's available by most municipalities particularly in the Mid-Atlantic areas. They're very good about that. So what do you do as an employer? I can't overemphasize this. You want to engage. You got to be proactive. It's your workplace, and your safety is paramount for the safety of your employees. So getting involved. Have a policy. If you have a workplace policy, make sure it sets expectations and what behavior is acceptable and not acceptable, including the PFA. You want to encourage employees that if they get a secure PFA, they feel comfortable by reporting it to you in the workplace, and how you want to handle that. And so make sure that there's a person that they can go to, whether that's the HR person, whether that's the ombuds person, or whether it's the owner of the business. Look at your security systems and recognize how you want to manage a situation if it should occur. Be prepared, train your employees. The Homeland Security has a great video. You can go on YouTube or do a Google search on Run, Hide, Fight. It's a great program. It really focuses on what to do. So if you have an active shooter or an intruder, you want to have employees leave, extricate themselves from the workplace. If they can't do that, hide in a secure environment, lock the door, turn out lights, things of that nature. If they get trapped and the intruder comes at them, fight. Use that fire extinguisher in the office, things of that nature. Have your resources set up in advance. I can't overemphasize that. Make sure you have your employment counsel, if you have it, a PR firm, your security people. Make sure that they're all prepared in advance. I once was the senior person on deck at corporate one day, and we had a mass shooting in one of our nursing homes outside of DC. And I was in Baltimore, and I went to this scene. And as I'm going there, I had my checklist. Now I know this stuff by the back of my hand. I still looked at the checklist, made sure that I followed the protocol, just like a pilot does when they're flying. They want to go through their protocol, make sure they've done everything. This is the same way. You want to be methodical and make sure. So I had my PR firm on the phone. I read the statement that I had prepared in advance because that was one of our protocols prepared statement, went over that. So when I arrived there, we had our security team there, we had our crisis counseling people, and I was ready to talk to the employees and their families. And nothing's more reassuring than when you have a senior level person talking to people, confident, making sure that they know what's going on and what's going to happen, and walking them through the scene while police are still around there. It can be kind of disconcerting. So you want to make sure you control as much as you can. If you engage with an employee, be an active listener. Be genuine about it. Really listen to them. Be empathetic. Be sympathetic to their concerns. Be supportive. If there's services available through your workers' compensation coverage, or you have an EAP, make sure you use it. Be aware of your red flags. You know your people in your workplace. Make sure you're mindful of that and be ready to act. You really want to make sure that your mindset is where you want to be and be able to act in those situations so that they can respond and you can respond thoughtfully. Now, I want to stop here and open it for any questions if anybody should have any.
Thanks, Philip. That was really interesting. We do have some interesting questions coming through, as I'm sure you can imagine. Have you ever been involved in a situation where two employees had a PFA against each other?
Yes.
And what do you do then?
Get on the phone with your attorney.
Yeah.
So that first you want to see the PFA. You want to see if one really exists. And you want to read what's spelled out in the PFA. Are they to be not together in the workplace? And this becomes really challenging. I had a husband and wife who were separated, and each one filed a PFA. So they each had PFAs, and they worked in the marketing department. So it became very traumatic in terms of what we were going to do, because you want to be balanced in your approach. So in this case, they could not be more than like 200 yards from each other. And so what we did was we did alternate weeks. One could work at home and one could work in the office. And we were fair to her and we were fair to him. Sometimes that can work out if you have a workforce that you can do that with. But if you're in a manufacturing setting, that becomes more of a challenge.
Sure. And I can imagine that there are some situations where employees feel that you're overstepping by wanting to get a little bit into their business, right?
Yeah, and I think if you explain that, I mean, especially with I can't overstate this, the number of mass shootings we've had in the workplace are just, if this was 10 years ago, I think most people would want to get in people's affairs. But because these escalate so quickly, you want to really drive it home that you care about the employee, not that you're getting in their business, but you care about their employee and the safety of workers in the workplace.
Sure. And here's an interesting question I'm sure crosses a lot of people's minds. Assuming that it's legal to do so in the jurisdiction that you're in, how do you feel about somebody in the company in a high level having a gun in the workplace?
Well, I'm not getting in my personal views. Let me say it this way. Having been in a shooting and when I was an agent, it's one that you'll remember. And if you feel that you are equipped, trained, skilled, and knowledgeable and using a firearm, and you feel comfortable by using it in a dangerous situation, and you have insurance, and your employer knows you have the gun, then that would be something I would give consideration for. But I can tell you this, I'm based in Florida, and it's fairly common for to have a firearm. Concealed weapons are easy to get here in Florida, but you still have a 4-hour training class and an examination. So if you're in a state and you're a competent person like that and you have insurance coverage, it's something that I don't embrace, to be honest with you, because if you do shoot and the police do come, you'll be the first person on the floor. And you don't know how the police are going to react with you because they're going to see a gun. And that's one of the things. So if you're like myself, I'm trained. I won't wear a firearm in the workplace just because I just didn't think it, I don't want to, it's not something I'm comfortable having been there.
I completely get that. Okay. Thank you so much. This was so interesting. I have a belief that we're probably going to get demands for you to come back. So stay tuned, everybody. And yeah, thank you so much.
All right. Thank you for the opportunity.
All right.
All right. Have a good day.